Good evening, everyone. I'm your storyteller, and tonight I'll take you into online dates that turn into pure horror. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where and when you're watching. Now, prepare yourself for the fear that lies ahead. Episode 1: The Fugitive in the Old Cabin. I was already dead. But before leaving this world, I left behind an old cabin deep in the forests of North Carolina, where rotting wood reeked of mildew, where the darkness was as thick as a filthy blanket smothering every crack. That house, from the outside, was nothing more than a corpse made of rotten wood. But I knew it held a memory that even as a ghost, I dared not recall too many times. It was the summer of 1988. The first summer I stayed in the cabin alone after my husband, Edward, had died. We used to come here for many summers, cutting ourselves off from the outside world, living with the sound of crickets and the pungent scent of pine resin. But when he passed, I still came back. Partly to try to learn how to endure loneliness, partly, perhaps, to wait for demons to appear. The living do not believe in such things. But ghosts like me know. Where there is pain, there it draws in the darkness. I still remember that very first night. The cabin had only one oil lamp. When lit, the pale yellow glow swept across the cracked wooden boards, revealing old, trembling cobwebs. Outside, the wind whistled through the door's gaps, carrying the smell of damp soil and decayed leaves, sometimes mixed with the acrid scent of burning resin from torches far below the valley. I listened to the tiny radio, the only thing connecting me to the world. The chain explosions in Georgia and Alabama still have no suspect found. Police believe the culprit, Claus Belmont, may be hiding in the mountains of North Carolina. That name, Claus Belmont. The sound of it crawled into my ears, leaving a metallic taste in my mouth, as though I had just bitten a rusted coin. This man was described as medium-built, dark-haired, bright-eyed, and considered extremely dangerous. I muttered, then suddenly whistled a Christmas tune Edward used to love. That melody seeped into the damp summer cabin, making me shiver. Singing Christmas songs in June was already considered bad luck, but I couldn't stop. It was as if someone whispered in my ear, "Remember that name, do not forget." Nights in the Appalachians always had their own rhythm. The insects droned like drums. The owls' distant hoots served as background music. Occasionally, the wood of the cabin cracked with a sharp snap, jolting my heart. I imagined Edward still sitting on the chair beside me, tapping his pipe against the table, the sweet smell of tobacco mingling with the moldy dust. But the chair was empty. Around 9 p.m., as the oil lamp's light weakened, I heard a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks only. But they pounded against my chest like hammers. In this area, the nearest neighbor was miles away. No stranger had any reason to climb the mountain at that hour. I froze in place, my hand trembling on the door handle. Outside, the wind stopped, leaving only a thick silence, so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I opened the door. A man stood there. He wore a cowboy hat, the darkness covering half his face, but I still saw clearly the bright eyes, cold as moonlight on a lake. The smell of road dust and sweat clung to his clothes, harsh and sharp like bootleg liquor. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am," he said, voice hoarse, strangely polite. "I forgot to buy some food. Would you mind giving me a little?" In that instant, every sense in me rang alarm bells, but hospitality and the loneliness of a widow made me step aside and let him in. The man called himself Clay. He said he had a cabin nearby, just stopping by to ask for some dried food for dinner. Silently, I opened the cupboard, took out canned beans, dried fruit, salted meat. As I bent to pack them for him, I smelled the old leather and sweat soaked into the jacket he had hung loosely on the chair. That smell reminded me of a wild animal's den, musty, threatening. When I looked up, he was staring at me. His eyes shone so bright they made me shudder. I asked casually, "What's your full name, Clay?" And then, instead of inventing a false surname like any fugitive would, he smiled and replied, "Belmont." The name dropped into the cabin like a heavy stone. The oil lamp flickered, his shadow stretched long across the wall like a hanging rope. My stomach clenched, as if a cold hand had gripped it tight. He was Claus Belmont, the terrorist America was hunting. I didn't scream, I didn't run, I just stood still, listening to the pounding of my heart, the suffocating oil smoke stench, the wind outside shifting, whipping the roof like a lash. I knew this cabin had no phone, no way to call for help, and if I reacted wrong, I would die right there on the old wooden floor. I didn't die that day, but the moment I opened the door and let him in, that was when my soul was marked. If before you had only listened to me tell the story, from here on, I want you to feel it. Try to put yourself in that creaking wooden chair in the lonely cabin where the oil lamp's glow wasn't enough to chase away the darkness writhing like a starving beast. I sat there, facing Claus Belmont, the man the entire nation feared. He sat down calmly, as if that cabin was his home. His tall shadow slithered up the wooden wall, blending into the jagged black cracks. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, voice soft, smooth as oil. "Few kind people like you are left." I smiled, but there was a metallic tang in my mouth. I tried to stay calm, my hand trembling slightly as I poured water. The old porcelain cup clinked against the table, the sound sharp, echoing like a gunshot in the silent house. He looked at me, his shining eyes seeming to pierce every thought. I realized those eyes were not of a man on the run, but of a hunter leisurely watching his prey. When I was about to find an excuse to send him away, he said, "Actually, there's one more thing I'd like to ask. Do you have a place for me to sleep tonight?" I felt my heart freeze. Outside, the wind whipped the window hard, the curtain fluttered. The cabin grew unnaturally cold, as if icy breath seeped through every crack. I shook my head, voice trembling. "Sorry, my house has no room." For a second, the air turned solid. He tilted his head, then suddenly pulled something from his coat. A flash of metal. A gun. I don't know where the strength came from, but my hand grabbed Edward's old flare gun hanging on the wall. I raised it, the barrel shaking, pointed straight at him. "Don't make me use this," I blurted, hoarse. What chilled me most wasn't that he wasn't afraid, but the way he smiled gently, politely, as though I had just offered him another cup of tea. Through dinner, he was still courteous, still spoke politely, but every word he said carried something cold as a blade against my neck. When I bowed my head to pray before the meal, he whispered something strange. "In the end, the righteous shall prevail." That sound rang in the cabin like a judgment. I swallowed hard, the food in my mouth suddenly turning to ash. The smell of oil smoke, his sweat, the metallic scent of the gun he had placed beside him, all thickened in the air, choking me. At night I didn't sleep. I lay in my room, ear pressed to the fragile door, listening to him shifting on the old chair in the living room. Every little noise, the creak of wood, his sigh, made me imagine him stepping into my room, gun aimed at my head. Around midnight, a strange sound shattered the silence, the whir of blades, the heavy rumble of engines shaking the cabin. I rushed to the window. Outside, the sky blazed, white lights sweeping across the forest like heavenly beams. A helicopter was hovering right above the cabin roof. The light poured in, shining straight onto Klaus Belmont sitting motionless. His face lit up, and I swear in that moment I saw a proud smile. I thought the door would burst open, FBI agents storm in. But no, the helicopter hovered a while, then slowly flew away, leaving the cabin sinking back into darkness. He still sat there, calm, as though the whole world outside had nothing to do with him. And I, for the rest of my life, never forgot that feeling. Sitting across from a man who had killed hundreds, but behaved like a gentleman. In the flickering oil lamp, he was like a demon who knew how to wear a coat and smile. That night lasted like a lifetime. I lay in bed, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to every sound from the living room. Sometimes the wooden chair creaked as he shifted. His sighs echoed steadily, not the sound of fear, but of someone long used to living with danger. And I, every muscle trembling under the thin blanket, was so cold my joints stiffened. After midnight, the cabin sank into utter silence again. Even the insects outside stopped, as if the whole forest held its breath. I closed my eyes, praying for morning to come. But when light flashed, again it wasn't from the sun. A massive white beam swept across the window, so bright my shadow stretched up the ceiling. The sound of blades returned, this time so close the cabin shook violently. I peeked through the curtain. FBI helicopter. Their searchlights scanned the roof, the forest, our location. In that moment I thought I was saved. I was about to scream, but Klaus Belmont sat still, raising his head toward the light, his eyes glowing strangely. And then the helicopter passed over, disappearing into the night. No one entered, no door was broken. The cabin plunged back into darkness, so heavy it felt like the night itself had weight, pressing down on my chest. I curled deeper under the blanket, waiting for something terrible to happen. But nothing did. No footsteps entered the room, no gunfire, only my heart pounding like a drum in my frail chest. Then I drifted into unconscious sleep without knowing when. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the window. The cabin was warmer, the air lighter. I opened the door to the living room. The wooden chair was empty. The bag I had stuffed with dried food was gone. No sign he had been there. If not for the small paper on the kitchen table, I might have thought it was all just a nightmare. The handwriting was crooked, but clear. "Thank you for the hospitality. God bless you." I held the note, the ink still sharp, like a blade cutting into memory. Years later, when I died and became a wandering ghost in that very cabin, I still remembered that night. Others feared him because he killed, because of bombs, because of the relentless news. But I feared him for another reason. He sat before me, polite, gentle, speaking like an ordinary man. No screaming, no madness, no savagery revealed. But I knew, behind that polite smile, he had planted bombs that killed hundreds. He carried evil within him and hid it with courtesy. I feared that normalcy, because that was the most terrifying mask. People often think monsters have claws, glowing red eyes, or reek of rotting flesh. But in truth, sometimes monsters wear clean coats, cowboy hats, say thank you and God bless. I sit here, telling you this as a spirit, and I only want to remind you of one thing. Do not trust polite appearances. Demons may show themselves in the dark, but humans can sit at your table, smile politely, while their hands are still stained with blood. Episode 2. The Blood-Soaked Man at the Back Door. I tell this story with the voice of a ghost, for I left the world of the living long ago, and now I only wander around an old house in a desolate town in the American Midwest. Every brick, every wooden plank of that house still remembers the screams, the frantic breaths, and the stench of blood haunting the night I am about to recount. When I was alive, my name was Daniel. That year, I was only 15. My family had just moved from the city to a small town with fewer than 300 people. They said life here was more peaceful, but from the very first step I took, all I felt was dread. The house we moved into sat right between three things that could terrify any child: an old mossy church, a patchy cemetery with cracked tombstones, and an abandoned school with shattered windows and crumbling walls. The wind rushed through the school's empty halls, creating an eerie howl, like 100 children whispering. I was haunted by the thought that those children were no longer alive. Worst of all, there was no internet here. For a boy used to neon lights, movies, and online games, being trapped in this dead town was nothing short of exile. I had only a few old games on my computer and some worn-out DVDs. Over and over again. That fateful night, I stayed awake until nearly 3 in the morning. My room was on the second floor, facing the backyard. I was playing an old sniper game when suddenly I heard a sound that was nothing like my computer. Rustle, rustle. The crunch of dry leaves being crushed right under my window. I pulled off my headphones, heart pounding, and pressed my face to the glass. Outside was pitch black, only streaked by broken moonlight. I saw nothing but branches shivering in the wind. I told myself it must have been a stray cat. But then, our dogs started barking. They howled furiously, their echoes tearing through the backyard. My skin crawled. I dashed down the stairs, about to run to the basement to call my mother and stepfather. But as soon as I reached the steps near the kitchen, I froze. There was a loud bang at the back door, then a hoarse scream seeping through the small glass pane. "Please open the door. They're hunting me. I'm going to die." I froze solid. My feet felt nailed to the wooden floor. Through the fogged glass, I saw a figure swaying. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw clearly. It was a man, and he was drenched in blood. The metallic tang of blood seeped through the cracks in the door, mixing with the rusty scent of the doorknob. My stomach twisted, my breath quickened. His face was smeared, blood soaking down to his collar. His eyes bulged wide, bloodshot with terror. "Please! I'm being chased! Someone tried to kill me in the woods. They shot me. Let me hide in your house just for a moment." My stepfather had already rushed up, standing firm in front of the door. He didn't open it. His voice was sharp. "Where are you hurt? Show me your wound." The man stepped back half a pace. He raised his hands, and in the moonlight I saw blood gleaming on his skin. But there were no tears, no bullet holes, not a single wound. His voice changed, stammering. "No, it's not my blood. It's the blood of my partner. They shot him. I just—" His words fell apart like a broken tape recorder. My mother came running up, her face pale. My stepfather shouted at me to call the police. I had just lifted the phone when the pounding returned, harder this time. A bloody hand slammed the glass, leaving a smearing streak of red. His screams turned into a roar, half begging, half threatening. "If you don't open this door, all of you will die with me, I swear it." The wood boomed under his fists. The frame shook violently. The dogs howled like mad. And I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, the operator's voice faint and distant amid my panic. That was when I knew. Whatever was outside wasn't just a man in need. It was a beast wearing human skin, and its blood had already seeped into my very mind. I can never forget that moment, when the entire house felt like a fragile cage, and outside was a blood-soaked animal, screaming to get in. My stepfather stood at the door, his hunting rifle trembling in his hands. He shouted through the glass, "Get out of here! The police are coming!" The man outside stopped for a moment. He tilted his head up, eyes bulging, the whites overtaking the pupils. His words hissed through clenched teeth, broken and raspy. "The police won't make it. They're already surrounding this place. If you don't open this door, you'll all die with me." Then he lunged at the door again. Fists and boots pounded relentlessly. Wood groaned, paint chipped, streaks of blood smeared across. The stench flooded in, as if someone had poured rust and rotting meat right at our kitchen door. My mother rushed off, dragging out an old metal box from under the bed. She opened it, pulled out a small pistol, and shoved it into my stepfather's hands. The moment his fingers touched the trigger, the man outside changed his tone. No more begging, no more sobbing. Only a savage roar. "Fucking open this door! I'll tear every one of you to pieces!" Each blow bent the door inward, the hinges screeching. I pictured the door bursting, him storming in, body dripping blood, hot breath steaming, and a crazed grin splitting his face. I stood frozen, phone pressed tight. On the other end, the operator's voice was urgent. "Where are you? Are you safe? Police are on the way. Stay on the line. Don't hang up." But I barely heard it. My ears were full of pounding fists, screaming, and the dog's hoarse howls outside. My whole body trembled, hand clamped numb around the receiver. Cold sweat dripped down my neck, soaking my collar with a bitter sting. And then, suddenly, he stopped. Silence. Outside, the wind blew, leaves rustled. But no more pounding, no more screams. I could swear I heard his footsteps retreat. A flicker of hope sparked in me. Maybe he had gone. But just then, a shrill scream split the night, stretching high and long, chilling my skin to gooseflesh. "They're here! They're surrounding your house! I see guns! They'll shoot all of you!" My stepfather quickly shut off every light. The house sank into suffocating darkness. My mother clutched me tight, her breath ragged, the acrid mix of sweat and tears soaking her sleeve. In the dark, each second was heavy as stone. I feared that at any moment, real gunfire would erupt, bullets ripping through the walls, through our flesh. The man outside howled again, pounding and shrieking. "They've got you surrounded. You fool. You'll get your whole family killed. You'll all die like me." The banging grew wilder than ever. I heard his heels smashing the wooden steps, the small window cracking with a sharp line. I saw my stepfather raise his gun, his finger on the trigger. In his eyes the faint light from outside reflected, his pupils blazing like an animal cornered. I don't know what would have happened if the police hadn't arrived in time, but at that moment I knew for certain. The real monster wasn't in the cemetery behind the house, nor in the abandoned school. It was right at our door, flesh drenched in blood, screaming like a rabid beast, separated from us by nothing but a fragile slab of wood. The pounding grew stronger still. The back door looked like it had only a few more strikes before it gave way. I clutched the phone, stammering into the receiver, my head clouded by the acrid stench seeping through the cracks. Then, from afar, another sound cut through. A long wail, a police siren. Tears nearly spilled from my eyes. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights spilling through the living room windows. The man on the porch froze. He staggered back, his eyes darting wildly like a trapped animal. The cold police loudspeaker boomed, "Hands up! Step off the porch! Get on the ground immediately!" For a moment, I thought he would resist, would charge into the house to drag us down with him, but he only stood there, trembling, then slowly let his bloody hands drop. Floodlights caught him full, revealing a figure straight from a nightmare. A shirt stiff with dried blood, torn pants, mottled skin, lips quivering without a sound. He slowly knelt, pressing his face against the blood-stained porch. His hands shook as he raised them. Police stormed in, bound him tight, the handcuffs clamping shut with a sharp click. The house fell silent. I collapsed to the floor, legs weak as if I had run miles. My mother burst into tears, her hot tears soaking my shoulder. My stepfather stood frozen, gun still in his hand, eyes locked on the outside. Outside, the police dragged the blood-soaked man to the car. In the strobing red and blue lights, he looked like a walking corpse hauled across the dirt. I thought the nightmare was over. But what haunts me most wasn't the pounding fists or the threats. It was the truth that came after. The next morning, the police told us that man was an addict living near town who had suffered psychotic episodes before. He had tried to break into houses during fits of paranoia, but had never been as violent as pounding and screaming like a beast the way he had that night. They said the blood on him was untraceable. He had no injuries, not a cut, not a bullet wound, and no partner was found anywhere in the woods. There was only him, his entire body soaked in blood. I no longer live to tell the rest of my life, but the memory of that night clings to me, even as I wander as a ghost. I still hear the pounding on the door, the drip of blood on the wooden steps, the stench seeping down the hall. Years have passed, and the house has been abandoned. But sometimes, at 3 a.m, those passing by swear they hear dogs howling, fists pounding, and the hoarse scream of a man begging. As for me, the spirit trapped in this house, I can only whisper to you, demons don't always appear in form. Sometimes they stand at your door, knocking softly, and all it takes is one turn of the lock, and you will never live in peace again. Episode 3. The Figure in the Shadows at the Texas Farm. My name is Will, but now names don't mean anything anymore, because I'm not human anymore. I died many years ago, yet my soul is still trapped around the vast Texas fields, where the night cold seeps through every grain of soil, and the darkness swallows every trace. I wander the farm of my grandmother, the place that buried a memory I can never escape. The story began on a late autumn night, when the air was strange, burning hot in the day, yet bitterly cold at night. I had just turned 18, and I often visited my grandmother and little brother to keep them company after my grandfather passed away. That evening, I turned into the farm after dinner in town. The half-mile dirt road was pitch dark, lined with rows of cotton and rustling dry corn. When I shut off the car engine, the darkness instantly consumed everything, leaving only the dim yellow porch lights spilling across the yard in scattered patches. We, my brother and I, sat on the porch listening to music. The sound from the phone drowned out the crickets and distant barking dogs. The cold seeped through my sweater, making me shiver, my breath a pale mist in the air. When I was about to head inside, I caught a glimpse of movement near the barn, the big metal barn about 300 yards away. A tiny flicker of light flashed and went out, like a flashlight being blocked. I froze, my heart skipping. But my brother scoffed, probably just a raccoon, or moonlight bouncing off some metal. Grandma's dog didn't bark either. The silence was so heavy I convinced myself it was only my imagination. So we went inside. Grandma went to bed around 11. My brother and I stayed up late, playing video games until about 2:30. Exhausted, I said I was heading home and asked him to walk me to the door so he wouldn't be scared. The Texas night was thick as tar. When the porch light clicked off behind me, the darkness swallowed the dirt road whole. I drove home safely, nothing happened. But just as I finished a cup of ice cream, I got a video call from my brother. His face filled the screen, pale, drenched in sweat, eyes wide like he'd just seen a ghost. He didn't speak at first, only gasped for breath. I pressed him. What happened? Then he told me, voice shaking, words broken. After I left, he stayed on the porch for a while, headphones in. Music filled the silence, covering every sound outside. Then he heard something strange, the clang of metal. Tap, tap. He pulled out his earbuds and looked up. From the barn, a faint white light flickered. A flashlight. Then darkness again. He grabbed Grandma's pistol and stepped to the edge of the porch. His heart pounded so hard his ears rang, but he still shouted, "Who's out there? Show yourself." Silence. Only the wind moving across the fields, carrying the sharp, dry scent of rotting hay. Then a sound in reply. A single knock from inside the barn's shadows. He knew someone was in there. And the horrifying thing was, no one in town had any reason to be on that land at 3 a.m. My blood ran cold listening to him. I wanted to scream at him to run, but my throat closed. The screen shook as he backed up, pistol out in front. And then, from the darkness, a figure stepped out of the barn. Tall, thin, hunched shoulders, a flashlight in his hand. The beam lit a gaunt face, skin pale and waxy. His steps were heavy, slow but steady, coming closer to the porch. My brother's eyes bulged. Watching through the screen, I swear to you, that shape was no raccoon, no neighbor, no ordinary drifter. It was something else, something that had stood in the shadows all night, waiting for me to leave. My brother held his breath, hands gripping the gun, while I sat frozen watching. The video shook, porch light casting eerie shadows. The thin man walked out of the barn, each step crunching dried grass beneath him. His flashlight shone upward, exposing blotchy pale skin, deep, hollow eye sockets. The night breeze carried a sour smell, like rusty iron and dead mice wafting from the barn. My brother screamed, his voice cracking, "Stop! I've got a gun! Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He just kept coming, slowly, deliberately pressing forward as if to corner his prey. His feet scraped the ground, making a dragging sound like dry bones being pulled. I nearly yelled into the phone, "Fire a warning shot! Don't let him get close!" My brother cocked the gun, click, sharp and loud in the silence. He raised it, aiming straight at the man's head. His voice trembled, but he shouted, "I'll shoot for real. Step back now." This time, the man stopped. For a moment, I saw his lips twitch, almost a smile. A crooked, half-smile that chilled me to the bone. Then suddenly, he raised both hands, trembling, and spoke in a low, raspy voice. "Hey, relax. I'm not doing anything, just passing through." But the tone was wrong, not pleading, more like mocking. And even as he spoke, he kept inching closer to the porch. My brother's voice cracked, almost crying, "Stop! I'll shoot!" He kept advancing. Then, bang! A gunshot split the night. My brother had fired, the bullet whistling past, striking the air just above the man's head. The blast thundered across the fields, echoing all the way to the tree line. The acrid scent of gunpowder filled the air, overpowering hay and damp soil. The man jolted, his flashlight wavering wildly. Finally, he stopped. A moment later, he spun around and bolted down the dirt road, his gaunt frame vanishing into the night as quickly as if he'd never existed. The phone camera shook violently, my brother gasping, nearly sobbing. His hands trembled so hard I thought the gun would fall. He rushed inside, slammed the door, locked every bolt, then woke Grandma. She only shook her head, her voice dry and flat. "Out here, that ain't unusual. You'll just have to get used to it." But I knew this wasn't some ordinary drifter. The light in his eyes, the way he walked without ear of the gun, and that crooked smile. It carried something I couldn't name. That night, my brother didn't sleep. He sat by the window, gun on the table, ears straining at every sound. And me, safe in my house miles away, couldn't sleep either. Because I knew he hadn't gone. He was just waiting. After that gunshot, nothing was the same again. My brother told me he sat inside until dawn, eyes glued to the window, ears tuned to every noise. But outside, the Texas fields stayed unnervingly quiet. No footsteps, no flashlight. Only the dry corn rustling, sounding like the shadows still lingered nearby, just not stepping out. When morning came, Grandma opened the door as if nothing had happened. Sunlight lit the fields, but my brother froze. Because right there in the dust before the porch were long, clear footprints. They started from the barn, ran straight to the porch, then back again. But stranger still, another set of smaller prints branched off, circling around the house. The police were called. They searched the property, even inside the barn. Inside was pitch black, musty with rot, dust thick everywhere. But one thing made them stop cold: an old wooden chair set in the middle. On it, signs that someone had sat there recently, sweat stains, a strand of greasy hair, a crumpled peppermint candy wrapper, which proved something horrifying. He hadn't just come that night. He had been using the barn as shelter. He had been living on the farm for a long time. After that, my brother never slept peacefully again. The slightest noise on the porch, he would leap up, gun ready. Every time he passed the barn, he felt eyes watching through the cracks. And me. I couldn't escape the haunting either. Many nights in town, lying in bed, my phone would buzz. A nameless message, just one line. Don't turn off the light. I never knew where they came from, but the feeling, as if he was still out there, still watching. Years later, I died in a car accident on that same dirt road leading to the farm. My soul was trapped, wandering the cornfields, lingering between the barn and Grandma's porch. And I realized a terrifying truth. That shadow from that night never left. In the darkness, I still see him. Thin frame, hunched shoulders, flashlight shining up at his face, mouth twisted into that crooked half-smile. He doesn't see me, but I see him clearly every night. I tell you this, not to scare you, but to remind you. Ghosts may live in memories, but the one outside your door, waiting for you to turn off the light, that one is flesh and blood. And sometimes humans are far scarier than ghosts. Episode 4. The car stalled on the empty highway. I am Sarah. Or at least, that used to be my name when I was alive. Now, I am nothing more than a spirit, trapped on the abandoned highways of Nevada, where the desert winds burn the skin and the darkness feels like it could swallow both people and memories whole. I tell this story so you will understand why I can never escape, why I must forever stand beside that broken-down car, looking back at the night of fate. That night, I had just finished a late shift at a small bar. The clock struck past 2 in the morning, the highway ahead empty, stretching endlessly, faint yellow lights scattering across the black asphalt. I drove alone, window rolled down to breathe in the cool night air. The desert wind was dry, filled with dust, sharp and acrid, carrying a damp trace of the night. The faint music inside the car eased my loneliness a little, but it could not drown out the chilling realization. For dozens of miles around me, there was not a single other car. Suddenly, the car jerked. The headlights flickered. The engine coughed a few times, then died completely. I tried turning the key over and over, but all I heard was the dry, hopeless clicking sound. In the middle of the deserted highway, the car stalled. My phone had no signal. I knew I was stuck. I turned on the hazard lights and stepped outside. The cold air seeped into my skin, making me shiver. The road was utterly silent, the only sound the wind whistling through the dry grass along the shoulder. In the distance, the dark shapes of mountains loomed like enormous, motionless blocks, menacing. I leaned against the car, telling myself I would wait until morning for someone to pass by. But then, when I lifted my head, I saw a figure. About 100 feet away, by the roadside, a human silhouette stood still. Not moving, not walking closer, just standing there, silently watching me. The flickering light from my car cast a dim glow on a pale face, as if he had no flesh, only a mask. My heart pounded wildly, sweat breaking out on my forehead despite the freezing wind. I scrambled back into the car, locking the doors tight, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the eyes, a tree, a post, anything. But when I glanced at the rearview mirror, the figure had drawn closer, now only halfway across the road. His steps were slow, shoulders hunched, arms dangling as though dislocated. No sound, no words. Only the eyes, hollow and black, staring at my car, as if deciding whether to knock on the window or find another way inside. I trembled uncontrollably, clutching the steering wheel, whispering prayers. In that moment, I understood a terrifying truth. I was not abandoned alone on the highway. I was being watched, and he was coming closer. As he approached, I realized how long time could stretch. Each of his slow steps felt like a century. The distance from the roadside to my car was only a few dozen feet, but I could hear the wind shift with every move, the crunch of gravel under his feet. I tried to tell myself he was just a lost traveler, someone stranded too, maybe needing help. But no, deep inside, my instincts screamed this was no ordinary man. No one stands motionless for minutes in the dead of night, then silently advances without a word. Inside the car, the space suddenly shrank, suffocating. I locked the doors tight, my trembling hand hovering over the horn, ready to blare if he came any closer. The hazard lights blinked, casting red and yellow across the asphalt. And then I saw his face clearly. His skin was so pale it glowed in the light, sickly white, like wax stretched over a skull. His eye sockets were hollow, empty, no pupils in sight. His thin, cracked lips twisted into a crooked grin. He reached the side of the car, lowering his head to the window. Knock, knock, knock. The sound rattled in my ears, paralyzing my body. His fingers tapped slowly, rhythmically like the heartbeat of something not human. I screamed, "Go away, I've called the police." But my voice broke apart, lost in the emptiness. He did not react, only tilted his head, his grin widening. He tapped again, harder this time, making the glass shake. I burst into tears, gripping the key, twisting desperately. The engine sputtered, then died again. Outside, the wind hissed through the cracks like someone whispering right by my ear, "You won't escape." He shifted position, moving slowly around the car. I followed him with my eyes, chest heaving, heart pounding. His shadow slid across each window, each flicker of light. When he reached the back, I glimpsed him in the rearview mirror. Both hands pressed against the glass, his face close, icy breath fogging a small patch. On the condensation he drew a circle, then a twisted smile. I screamed until my throat tore, slamming my fists against the steering wheel. In desperation, I grabbed my phone. No signal, only the front camera. In a frantic impulse, I turned it on, thinking if I died, at least someone would see this. The screen showed my face, blurred by tears, but behind me, in the window's reflection, another face, deathly pale, hollow eyes, a grin stretched ear to ear. I flung the phone, shrieking, curling into the driver's seat. But the knocking went on, slow and deliberate, as if he had the whole night to play. Knock, knock, knock. Each beat hammered my chest, choking my breath, raising goosebumps across my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for dawn. But that night stretched endlessly, and the figure outside never left. Until, at some moment, the knocking stopped. I cracked my eyes open, straining to hear. The darkness outside was eerily silent. No footsteps, no knocking, only the desert wind howling. I slowly lifted my gaze to the window. No one. The figure had vanished, as if he had never been there. But then, from behind my seat, I heard a whisper against my neck. "Let's go." I cannot clearly remember what happened after that whisper, only that when I turned, the seat behind me was empty. But the cold remained, seeping through my flesh, sinking into my heart. I screamed, cried, beat my bloody fists against the glass. Then everything went black. The next morning, police found my car on the roadside. The doors were still locked, the engine dead, the hazard lights drained of power, and me, gone. In the report they wrote there was no sign of struggle inside, no blood, only sweat-smeared handprints across the glass and countless scattered knocks along the body of the car. What unsettled them most was the back window. On the dried condensation was still the faint trace of a crooked smile, as if someone had drawn it from the inside. My family searched for me for months. Flyers posted across Nevada, my photo on local news, but no answers. People guessed I had run away or been kidnapped. No one mentioned the figure on the road, because that was only a panicked story recorded on the unsent message from my phone. But I know the truth. I died in that car, died in unspeakable terror. And my spirit has remained trapped on that empty stretch of highway ever since. Many truck drivers tell of seeing a young woman standing beside an old car, waving desperately for help at 3 a.m. When they slow to stop, her figure vanishes before their eyes. Some even claim they hear faint knocking on their windows when passing that stretch. 3 beats, slow. When they look, they see only desert wind and drifting dust. I still stand there, silently. Each time the wind rises, the metallic stench wafts around me, the scent of fear, of death unnamed. I watch cars speed past, hoping someone will stop, listen to my story, but even if they do, I cannot leave this place. I am bound to the memory, to that night when the car broke down and the pale figure tapped on the glass. I learned one thing after death. Never believe an empty highway is safe. Never think that if your car stalls, you only need to wait until morning. Because it isn't always demons that come for you at night. Sometimes it's humans, or things that once wore the shape of humans, standing outside your window, smiling as they wait for you to break. And when you hear the 3 slow knocks, it may already be too late to pray. Episode 5. The Man Without a Face in the Small Town. I am Daniel. The town where I live is so small that it has only one gas station, a family diner, and an old church that creaks every time the wind sweeps through its bell tower. In a place where everyone knows each other, the arrival of a stranger always becomes the subject of gossip. But the night he appeared, no one dared to gossip anymore. It was a winter night. The air was so cold that every breath turned into thick white smoke, and the road was slippery as if wrapped in a thin layer of ice. I got off late from work at the diner, driving home along the main road leading to the outskirts. The clock on the dashboard jumped to 2:13 a.m., the cold, glowing number in the dark. When I reached the only intersection in town, I slammed on the brakes. Red light. Everything was deserted, silence so eerie it cut deep. The wind whistled through the dry roadside trees, carrying the smell of rotting wood, pungent, seeping straight into the lungs. And then I saw him. A tall, thin figure, standing right at the corner of the intersection, beneath the pale yellow lamp post. The light fell on him, but strangely, his face was blank. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a flat stretch of white skin. I flinched, my foot frozen on the brake pedal. In that instant, I thought I was seeing wrong. But he took one more step, closer into the light. Still no face. Just a bare, round head, smooth like an unfinished doll. I shuddered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Even inside the car, I could feel the chill radiating from him, as if the air itself was drained away, leaving only emptiness. The traffic light turned green. I hit the gas, the car shot forward. In the rearview mirror, he was still there, motionless, his head tilted slightly to one side, as if watching. When I got home, I was shaking so badly my hands couldn't even turn the key. I reassured myself maybe it was a prank, some addict. But that night's sleep was torn to pieces. I kept jolting awake, hearing knocks on the bedroom window. 3 slow beats. Knock, knock, knock. Each time I opened my eyes, I only saw the yard shrouded in white fog. No figure, no one standing there. But I knew he had followed me home. And that was only the beginning. After that night, I thought everything was just a hallucination from exhaustion. But then, I wasn't the only one who saw him. 3 days later, a boy in town told his mother that some man was standing by the playground watching me while he was on the swing. The mother panicked and rushed outside, but saw no one. Only footprints stamped into the damp ground, leading straight toward the swing, and then vanishing into empty space. Then came Mr. Thomas, the gas station attendant. He swore that around midnight, while sitting in the cashier's booth, he saw in the reflection of the glass a faceless man standing right behind him. When he turned around, no one was there, but the stale stench, like moldy fabric, lingered in the air. Rumors spread across the town. At first, everyone thought it was just a scare, but when the first disappearance happened, fear became real. A young woman, a regular at the diner where I worked, vanished on her way home. Her car was found near the intersection, doors wide open, headlights still on. On the car windows, people discovered smeared handprints forming a circle, as if someone had pressed their faceless head against the glass. Then came the second disappearance. This time, it was the convenience store owner. They found his old radio still playing in the room, the static-laced music mixed with an indescribable sound, like breathing right next to the microphone. The townsfolk gradually realized, whenever he appeared, someone would vanish. And the most terrifying thing, none of the missing were ever found. Not even a scrap of clothing or a trace of blood. Every night I curled up in my room, hearing clearly the 3 knocks at the window. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't dare open the curtain, didn't dare look out. But one night, as I tried to ignore it, I saw through the slit of the blinds a white figure standing still under the streetlight. He tilted his head, facing directly toward my room. The next day, the whole town was in uproar when another child disappeared. This time, the faceless one did not just linger outside. Rumor had it that several people saw him walking down the main street in broad daylight, where the sun illuminated every corner. But in every hurried photograph taken, his image never appeared. Only a blank space remained, a distorted patch as if torn from the picture. I knew he was getting closer, from the intersection to my yard to standing right beneath my window, and soon he would step into my room. I knew that night would come. For weeks, he only stood outside the window, knocking 3 times, patient as a predator waiting for exhausted prey. But on the final night, he no longer stayed outside. That night, I couldn't sleep. The winter wind whistled through the cracks in the door, carrying the sharp tang of rust. The clock ticked exactly 3 a.m. when I heard the sound. No longer the window knocks, but the creaking of hinges. My front door was opening. I trembled, clutching the kitchen knife I had kept beside my bed. My breath heavy, my heart about to burst. And then I saw him. He stepped into my house, tall and thin, head tilted sideways. The sickly yellow streetlight poured through the doorway, illuminating that pale face, blank. Still no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a stretch of taut, hideous skin, but the most terrifying thing wasn't the blank face. It was the breathing. Hoarse, wet, vibrating straight into my ears, even though he had no mouth. I screamed, staggering toward the window to escape. But when I looked up, he was already there. No longer at the front door, but right in front of me, blocking my way. The distance was only an arm's length. He tilted his head, and for the first time, I saw that flat, white skin begin to crack. Tiny fissures widened, revealing countless little mouths filled with sharp teeth, opening wide, hissing in unison with a sound that did not belong to humankind. I felt my hand go limp, the knife clattering onto the wooden floor. My whole body froze. I remember the cold of him pressing close, then darkness swallowing me. They never found me. Just like all the others in town, I disappeared without a trace. The house still stands, door ajar, lights flickering, and on the window glass remain 3 smeared knocks. Now I understand. I am dead, my soul trapped, wandering the cold streets of the town, watching more and more vanish. And I understand one more thing. The faceless one was never a ghost. He is the embodiment of emptiness, of evil born from humanity itself. Perhaps he was once a murderer, a drifter forgotten by society, until the darkness devoured him whole. Now he has returned to drag us with him. I tell you this not to scare you. I tell you because I know he hasn't stopped. Other small towns, those places that seem peaceful, will soon see his figure under the streetlights. And when you hear 3 knocks at your window at 3 a.m., remember me. Because sometimes demons are only fairy tales, but humans, once consumed by darkness, are far more terrifying than any ghost.